So we heard from the mouth from the south, well, I'm the beast from the east. Grew up in East Texas, which in these parts just means a little bit east of Dallas. But I'm a learning leader with Brittain-Kalish Group. We're a team of trusted advisors and business consultants. We're based in Fort Worth. Their background is in healthcare, and they used what they learned from the patient experience, and now they apply that to trainings for their businesses and for their business partners. And what we're talking about today is obviously generations in the workplace. And how many of you are currently in a business with multiple generations working side by side? Show of hands. Everybody. Yeah, this is something that affects every company in the country, and we're kind of at an unprecedented time. So there's plenty of generations, and what we see is people are retiring a little bit later. So now you have the older generations and this upcoming group of people that nobody knows anything about, all moving into companies together. And that creates a little bit of friction, but today we're going to talk about who these people are, where they came from, and how to get to know them a little bit better. So first, we're going to have everyone self-identify themselves. This is the only activity I'm going to have you do today. We're going to start with the young people because they can stand up a little bit longer. So we'll start with Generation Z. Do I have any young folks born from 1996 to 2010 in attendance today? Fantastic. We can make fun of them real well. All right. Where are the millennials, my people, 1980 to 1995? Awesome. Thank you. Generation X, 1960, remain standing, sorry. Generation X, 1965 to 1979. Awesome. Baby boomers, 46 to 64. Yeah. Hold tight. And then the traditional generation, 22 to 45. Fantastic. All right, give yourself a round of applause. Thank you. All right, you can be seated. So as Dr. Renee told us earlier, there is such a thing as imposter syndrome. I suffer from it a little bit, so I do that so I know the demographics of the audience, but it also helps my self-confidence to start out with a standing ovation. So thank you for that. So we'll go to the next one. So why is generational diversity so important? Well, we just had everybody in this entire room raise their hand and say that they work in a company that has these generations working side by side. But what's more important is that the conversation around generational diversity helps break down some of the other diversity categories. So what we have when we start talking about different types of diversities, you start putting people into boxes. So by race or gender or LGBT or whatever it is, we start putting people in boxes. And it's really difficult to have those conversations because you've already kind of separated people. So what this conversation does is it helps identify new ways of looking at everyone. So there's nothing I could say that would apply to everyone in this room other than the fact that we're all in this room. So how could you say something that would apply to 60 million people, 50 million people? Well, you just can't. So the conversation around generational diversity is very important. We'll go to the next one. So multi-generational offices enjoy a few different benefits. So you have cognitive diversity. And that's where different people from different walks of life, no matter what it is, whether it's generational, any kind of diversity, when you have a different motivation, when you have different ways of looking at the world, you have different ways of solving problems. So you're more likely to come up with a better solution faster. So you get increased productivity. When you have different people from walks of life, you have increased creativity because everybody has a different way of looking at it. You know, if I showed you the back of my hand, everybody in the room would say it's the back of my hand, but I say it's the palm of my hand. And it's just because I have a different perspective than you do. So you're able to look at things in a different way. Next is less fear and more innovation. You see this especially with the younger generation. So they already look out at their peer group and they don't have to think about it being diverse. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's already diverse. They look around and they see a diverse swatch of people all around them. So like-minded teams maintain, diverse teams innovate. So let's move to the next one. So here's an interesting study. A study by Boston Consulting Group, 1,700 companies, found that companies with more diverse leadership teams experience 19% more revenue growth than their non-diverse competitors. Who here would like 20% more money in their business? There you go. You're welcome. All right, so let's move to the next one. All right, so this is what our workplace looks like now and in the future. So we're going to kind of break it down by the numbers. And what you have here is by the year 2020, you have 6% baby boomers, 35% Gen X, 35% millennials, and 24% Gen Z. Now, if you read 10 different books, look at 10 different websites, you'll see 20 different variations of what that really is. But by the year 2025, what they all agree on is that Generation Z and millennials will make up to about 70 to 75% of the workforce. So sorry, Mr. Mayor, we're on the way. All right, so let's move to the next one. So what we're doing today is driving change through understanding. Because what's most important is it's good to kind of have a thought about what each generation is, but if you understand them from a fundamental level, it helps break down some of those barriers. And the driving part will make sense in just a moment. We're going to talk about the events that help shape a generation. So these are the events that took place in the formative years. So while you're in middle school, high school, while you're kind of discovering what the world really is. These are the events that kind of stand out in everybody's mind. Now, for the sake of time, I'm going to gloss over very, very difficult times in our country's past, but it's just for the sake of time. So let's move right into it. So our baby boomers, this is where the driving comes in. Everybody's going to get a car. So the baby boomers, well, first off, I gave this presentation to a room full of baby boomers. And I thought when this would pop up that I would start to get eye rolls and everybody would be offended. And then I looked out in the parking lot and there was a bunch of Mini Coopers with peace signs on them. So it fits. But let's move right into it. So everybody's going to get a category: advancement, media, tragedy, social, and political. So the advancement was the moon landing. We landed a man on the moon. If you don't believe that, you can see me after class. We landed a man on the moon. So this was very different streaming media than we have now. These kids got to sit and watch a TV that I believe back then you had to turn a knob, but it was hand to mouth back then. It was a little different times. But they got to stay up all night long, and then they very fuzzy got to see kind of a man in a funny suit bouncing around, and that was a man landing on the moon. So it was a huge time, huge achievement for our country. That helped shape this generation. Obviously, you have the JFK and the Martin Luther King assassinations, the civil rights movement. This is why when you talk about issues of diversity, it's often very, very important, but often overlooked, that baby boomers are a great generation to bring into that conversation, because they know what it was like before, and they know what it was like moving through it. So very important. And then obviously Vietnam. My grandpa was a medic in Vietnam, and after he got back, he was a truck driver. And he's a man that likes to tell stories, as most grandpas do. And he's told me the same story about a power line falling on his truck that he was driving and all this. He's told me that story 100 times. And it takes about an hour to get through that story. So it's a big chunk of my life on that story. But if you ask him about Vietnam, he won't really tell you anything. So it was kind of an interesting time, and it helped shape that generation. Most of our high school students now couldn't even imagine what it would be like for someone to walk in the room and say, okay, you, and you, y'all are going overseas to fight and you might not come back, right? Very difficult. All right, Generation X, the forgotten generation. I love that car. I can almost see the mullet flying out of the back of it. I guarantee you there's Coors Light in that trunk. All right. So advancement, personal computer, no PC, no smartphone. So huge advancement there. MTV, I believe they used to play music videos, not too sure. 24-hour news is very important. So your Challenger shuttle, I'm going to put those two together. One stereotype that we hear a lot about Generation X is that they are cynical. So if you put these two things together, it helps kind of uncover why that is. So when the Challenger shuttle exploded, the number of lives wasn't terrible by today's standards, unfortunately. But it was the first time that this was covered for 24 hours on television. And what happened as we started investigating into it, we see that NASA was pushing deadlines and corporations were cutting corners to fit budgets. So we saw that companies, the government can lie to us. And for the first time, we saw it covered for 24 hours a day. So yeah, a little bit of skepticism there. The OJ trial, my dad actually had a white Bronco at the time, and he sold it shortly after that for pennies on the dollar. I don't think he got much. Berlin Wall, Exxon Valdez, again, 24-hour news. You start to see these things unfold, and it's covered there. Millennials, we get a bike because we can't afford cars. Sorry. It was also pointed out that we don't have a pedal on that bike, so we have to walk the bike too. So advancements for millennials. Napster. Now this doesn't sound very important, but if you think back, I remember making mixtapes. Anybody ever make mixtapes? So you'd have the stereo. We don't have any Gen Z, but for the younger millennials, the stereo was a little, you know, it doesn't matter. So you put a tape in the stereo and you just sit there and wait for your favorite song to come on. And if you happen to be across the room, you'd have to run over there and hit record real fast. You'd still catch the DJ introducing the song, but it was a hot mixtape in '92. It was a really good tape. Up next, reality TV ruined intelligence for America. Tragedies, 9/11 and Columbine. So this was obviously very huge. For this generation, I remember I was supposed to go on a field trip that day, and we were supposed to take cameras to the Arboretum and take pictures of flowers and write poetry about it. Had a very different day that day. And for the first time, we kind of started to see after Columbine, you know, our country, our offices, our buildings, our schools are not as safe as we thought they were. And so the parents of this generation start asking these kids, how do you feel? Are you okay? Do you want to talk about it? So when you hear that millennials are a little more in touch with their emotions, first off, I don't know why you'd say that. But this certainly has a lot to do with it. But to go back to Napster and bring in online dating, if you can now, you can customize everything. You don't have to buy an album, and it only has 2 songs that you like. Now you just pick whatever song you want, and you have it. So you can customize a better mixtape now. And if you can customize a mixtape, why can't you customize a spouse? In comes online dating. I actually have 4 brothers and sisters that met their spouses through online dating profiles, and they're still married, so I guess it worked a little bit. Now it's a little more swipe left, and it's a little uncomfortable for everybody. Political, the recession. So you see the stereotype that millennials are disloyal. Well, when we entered the workforce went away. And we saw our parents get fired because they fell on the wrong side of an arbitrary number that a company came up with. So we saw that companies aren't as loyal to people. We can customize everything in our life. So yeah, we'll move on if we don't like where we're working. So that kind of plays into that stereotype. So we'll move last to Generation Z, Generation Edge, called edgy for 2 different reasons. Number 1, they have way too much entertainment at their fingertips. So if there was a Generation Z here right now, they'd have a tablet, a laptop, a cell phone, a smartwatch. They'd have all these screens in front of them. And it's too much information. It's information overload. They suffer from FOMO, which is fear of missing out, if anybody didn't know what that is. So it makes them a little edgy, right? The other reason they're called Generation Edge is because they are at a cultural edge in this country. They are the last generation to have a Caucasian majority in America. So when you bring in conversations and topics of diversity and inclusion, this is the generation you want to bring into that conversation. So let's look at some of their stuff. Advancement, artificial intelligence, virtual reality. That makes me feel like it's the future just to say it out loud, but it is the future. And they are the ones that are going to be the most capable of driving this technology, driving these advancements. Snapchat and Netflix. Somebody throw out a number. How many hours of programming do you think are available on Netflix? Just throw out a number. 300 million. It's 127 million hours of programming are available on Netflix. For YouTube, it's 1.3 billion. And 1.2 billion of that is just cat videos. So then they have their tragedies, very similar to the millennials. You start to see that your country, that your schools are not as safe as you thought they were. And again, they're asked about their emotions. So they're more in touch with their emotions than previous generations. Social, same-sex marriage, political, first black president, Barack Obama. So again, when you have these conversations of diversity and inclusion, these are the people to talk to. All right, next. So now we're going to talk about stereotyping. The way our brain works is that we are pattern recognition machines. So we take a little bit of data and we extrapolate that to meet everything else that we encounter in the world so that we know how to think about it. Now the problem is that we can often get bad information. So I've only been to New York City once before. I'm going a little bit later tonight. But when I was there the first time, I was robbed at gunpoint. Now does that mean that every time you go to New York City you get robbed at gunpoint? God, I hope not. All right? But technically it does. I've only been there once, so that's 1 out of 1 times I've been there, I got robbed at gunpoint, it's 100%. But if I thought that every time you went there, you would be robbed at gunpoint, I'd have never agreed to go today. So you can get bad information and you can draw false stereotypes. So let's look at some of the negative stereotypes with pictures to pop it up. These are what, if you happen to see baby boomers or Gen X in the wild, this is what they look like. Those are actually my parents, the baby boomers there. I'm just kidding. I'd have much better hair if those were my parents. So your baby boomers, lazy stoners, me, free love, long-haired hippies, Generation X, slackers, apathetic, cynical, skaters, dirty, not sure what that means, and the lost generation, all right? So those are all some of the negative stereotypes for those generations. Up next, your millennials, entitled, disloyal, poor work ethic, sensitive, again, I'm not sure why you'd say that, tech-obsessed, and emotional. It's really hard to read this sometimes. Your Generation Z, self-obsessed, tech-focused, social justice warriors, and millennials on steroids. Again, not sure how you just give someone a stereotypical steroid, but whatever. All right, so let's think about where these stereotypes come from. We talked about the way our brains process information. We are pattern recognition machines. We're also risk averse. So if we see danger, we avoid it whenever we can. And what we do is we build up these kind of invisible walls in our psyche so that we keep danger away from us. And we're a little scared of the upcoming generations. If there was a 20-year-old that knew everything that I know now, that had all the technology at his fingertips, that could do everything that I do, that's a scary thought. He could probably be a little more successful than I can. So I put up this barrier, and I start to create a negative stereotype around him. What makes headlines? Negativity. We give more credence to negative thoughts, negative things, negative stories. So that's what makes headlines. That's why your 1-hour news is 58 minutes of death, famine, poverty, war, injustice, and then the last 2 minutes, a cat saves a blind kid from a building. All right? And you don't even watch that part because you're waiting for This Is Us to come on. Okay? What gets shared on social media? Negativity. Who controls the media? Now, this is not a political question, this is an age question. So think about the path that it takes someone to get to where they are an on-screen personality for primetime news. Okay, they're going to go from radio intern, radio personality, TV intern, TV personality. That process takes a long time. So by the time they're in front of you, they're a little bit older. And what does every older person think about the younger generation? They're screwed, all right? So we give credence to the negativity. We project those negative stereotypes, and then they just continue to cycle. So why do we feel this way? Well, it's simple. It's fear. So we're afraid of the younger generations. Younger generations are afraid of the older generations, that they're not going to help them. I gave this presentation to, like I said, a room full of baby boomers. I asked them what they were worried about for the upcoming generations, the younger generations. They said they think they know everything, they don't ask us for help, and they don't think that we can help them when we offer our help. Then I gave that exact same presentation to a university full of Gen Z, and I asked them, what are you afraid of into going into the workforce? Their answer was the exact same. Baby boomers think they know everything and they don't want to help us. And when we don't know anything, we can't raise our hands because they think we're stupid. All right, so if we could just put those two things together, think of what we could accomplish. All right, let's move on. So let's look at the positive stereotypes. That's always good to do. Baby boomers, optimistic, team-oriented, and cooperative, ambitious, hard workers, and mentors. My mentor was a baby boomer, the woman that owns the company that I work for now, and one of my mentors is a baby boomer. There's very good partnerships between older and younger generations if we could just make it happen. Your Generation X, skeptical. Now, this is not a negative thing. Generation X makes very wise decisions. That's why they have all the money. Thanks a lot. We could use some, by the way. Skeptical, self-reliant, risk takers, balance work and personal life. When you hear that and you need your work-life balance, think a Gen X person, they came up with that. Okay, your millennials, hopeful, seek meaningful work. They value change and diversity, and they're collaborative. Your Generation Z, independent, socially minded, fair, diverse, educated, and tech native. So tech native is kind of important. You often hear that millennials are tech obsessed, tech focused, and we are tech dependent. We have to have it, and we know that it's important, but we have absolutely no idea how it works. I grew up playing with sticks, riding my bike, catching tadpoles. So if your computer breaks, don't ask a 30-year-old because we don't know, okay? All right, so let's move on. So let's talk about the impact of technology. So I talked about the personal computer, no smartphone. Now you hear a lot of stereotypes about millennials and that we're phone focused and that all we care about is ourselves. Real quick, if you don't mind. All right, everybody say millennials. I'm sorry, it's not my good side. Let's try again. Get this side of the room over here. Look at that. All right, so let's talk about the impact of technology. And let's really make it make sense. So I just took a picture with my cell phone, and if I post it on LinkedIn and say, hey, me and 200 of my closest friends just talked about generations in the workplace. Hashtag business, hashtag training, hashtag baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and just hashtag it up forever and ever. I have about 4,500 followers on LinkedIn, so I can turn that picture into actual money because those people might want, oh, look, we kind of need that training. Maybe ask this guy, right? So that's the impact that technology has on our lives. We get a lot of bad press for the phone, and people are too connected to it, but that's an amazing device that you have in your pocket. When we landed a man on the moon, it was nowhere near this sophisticated. Their computer that they used for that was kind of close to that computer that's in a card that when you open it, it plays Boot, Scoot, and Boogie. That computer got us to the moon. So think about what we can actually do with that. So let's look at technology a little bit further. So this guy right here, this guy. Everything in that picture, other than that guy, has been replaced by your smartphone. Okay, you don't need any of that stuff anymore. Those are VHS tapes. I can't even remember what it was. That's the thing. We used to have VHS rewinders. If you wanted to save time and money, you got yourself a rewinder. All right, so let's move forward. So Clint Eastwood says, kids these days are so attached to their phones, we had to work hard to get what we had, and this generation thinks they can do it all with their stupid smartphones, and the response is, LOL, bro, we can. It's the truth. What you can do with your phone is amazing. I can stay connected to anyone. I can talk to my high school English teacher, even though I don't want to. It's an option for me. But let's look at some of the side effects of social media. So there is a negative impact. If I posted that picture and I start to get a few likes, it feels good. And then I might check it 5 minutes later. Got a couple more, that feels good. Then I check it a little bit faster. I check it 4 minutes this time. Feels good. That's a dopamine addiction. What else releases dopamine? Risky sex, drugs, alcohol. So you want to talk about the gateway drug? Social media is your culprit right there. Highlight reels and depression and anxiety. So what I mean by that, the you that you put on social media is not the real you. And everybody knows that. You put your pictures of your vacation and all these great things that happen, and you think that everybody's going to think, oh, this person is amazing. I wish I had their life. And you start to know that you can't live up to the expectations that you've put out for yourself on social media. So that leads to depression and anxiety, because now we can't even live up to our own standards. But there is positive aspects. Instant access. I watched a speech that was by the CEO of CNBC or something. They were talking about social media, and they said that it offers this feeling that you can communicate with people too quickly. So I messaged him, and I was like, hey, what did you mean by that? There's constant connection. It's really cool that you can get to know or stay in touch with people that you wouldn't have been able to otherwise. And it's cheap marketing. We just talked about that. So let's move on a little bit. So how do we bridge the generation gap? And it's with empathy. So I want to do a little exercise, and I'm going to say a word, and what I want you to do is tell me what generation you think that word describes. Okay? So I want you to say it out loud, so I have to hear you. All right? So let's get it started. Fear. Scared. Powerful. Intelligent. Well, it's a smart group. You filled it out, you figured it out very quickly. So it's everybody. I told you at the beginning, there's nothing I could say that would apply to everyone in this room. Right? So how can you say something about 65 millennials or 60 million baby boomers that would apply to all of them? You can't. The way that you have to approach this conversation is the way that you have to approach every person that you interact with for your life. All right? Everyone in diversity conversations, they call it your backpack. Everyone shows up with a backpack full of their life's events. Everyone has a journey behind them that they've been through. Everyone lived through some of these events that we talked about earlier. Everyone was talking while that lady's phone was ringing. Everybody has this journey that's behind them. And when we think about our own journey, we think about our own backpack, and we never consider the fact that the other person we're interacting with has that same backpack, has that same journey. We just see them in the moment that they are. So what you have to do is understand that the people you're talking to are people. It doesn't matter what generation they're from. It doesn't matter what led them to be where you are right now. The fact is that they are human, and you have to get to know them. If you are a baby boomer, maybe step across the aisle a little bit and say, hey, I know it's really hard to start in this business. I've been doing it for 35 years. If you need any help, I'd love to help you. Okay? For the younger generations, go to the older generation. Say, hey, this is a really difficult business to get started in. I would love some help because I know you've been doing it for a while. Okay? It's super important that we have these conversations. You do have to sometimes kind of force these conversations, mainly because people have their phones in front of their face. And so you have to get them to put the phones down. You have to have a real personal interaction. Okay, I talk about it a lot, but if you want to stand out in sales, use the phone. Okay, stop emailing everybody. If you want to stand out in your business as a leader, talk to people. We've all receded behind these screens, behind these devices, and we've lost that personal connection. Okay, so everyone has different aspects of each generation. There are 75-year-olds that are on Snapchat. There are 18-year-olds that knit sweaters. So there's exceptions to every rule, and everyone can have this conversation, this communication with each other. So the truth about the generation gap is that it doesn't exist. So we just wasted 30 minutes, and I apologize. But the truth is it doesn't exist. We're all people. We're all humans. All you have to do is try to get to know the person as a person. You have to have the conversations. You have to get to know people where they are. Ask someone how they're doing and actually mean it. When they give you an answer, follow up on that. Ask them, okay, how was your day yesterday? Oh, it was fine. Well, yeah, did you have any struggles? Well, yeah, actually, it's a really hard day. Okay? They're going to tell you. This younger generation's more in touch with their emotions. We have emotional journals. We love watching Lion King, and we cry when the new Lion King movie came out. I actually did cry. That's a true story. So you have to get to know the people. You have to get to know them as people, because after you break down that gap, we're so powerful and we're so capable of some amazing things if we could just get over some of these negative stereotypes that we have. That's it. Thank you very much for having me today, and that'll do it.